Good day. This is CJ Miller, the host of the Spiritual Artist Podcast, and we are here to do the Doodle Book Club. You are to sketch in your journal using your subconscious mind while I share a chapter from my book. I'm in a very good place this morning because I did spend my time doing what I call a spiritual practice. I sat down and I read a couple chapters from The Infinite Way by Joel Goldsmith. I love reading works like this because it's inspiring. It gives me something to think about. And I want to share this with you, the listener, that we all create our own theology. And feel free to take what you love from this reading of the spiritual artist and disregard something if it doesn't work for you. I want to remind you that this is a personal journey, and we take what we need and we disregard the rest. So today we are going to read chapter 16, and I'm going to really enjoy this. So, quote, to know yourself as the being underneath the thinker, the stillness underneath the mental noise, the love and joy underneath the pain, is freedom, salvation, enlightenment. Eckhart Tolle. Chapter 16, Being and Receiving. As a spiritual artist, I watch what I think while painting. I practice moving away from negative thoughts and leaning into positive ones. I realize that all emotions add power to my actions and are welcome in the creative process. My emotions are stored in my body, and their presence and the physical aspect of my body affect how I interpret the world and the way that I approach the canvas. Consciously aware of my thoughts, emotions, and body, I did something a bit different one brisk morning. I woke to the sound of a yellow finch in the cottonwood outside my open window on this solitary visit to Santa Fe. Not in the usual rush of my everyday life, but in a slow, deliberate manner, I padded from my bedroom into the studio kitchen and began making breakfast. I realized I could achieve heightened attention to the world around me. I focused my attention on the process of making breakfast. I had bought a bag of bread and some bacon at the local store the day before, and the studio was still and silent as I placed several slices of bacon in the skillet, and they began to sizzle. I put the toast in the toaster and listened to the immense quiet surrounding me. I realized I was softly navigating myself. I was not dismissing the world surrounding me, but I was intensely aware of its texture and detail. I moved deliberately. The toast crunched as I cut it with a knife and had a rich, nutty flavor. The bacon, sandwiched between the slices of bread, was salty and a bit tangy. I slowly chewed and enjoyed the process of eating in silence. My goal wasn't to consume the toast quickly, but to enjoy each bite for as long as possible. I could feel my body and the space around it completely. I finally understood the phrase I had seen scrawled on my desk in college. It is about the journey, not the destination. It's not about getting to an end, but being on the journey. I sensed the entire room as though part of myself. My small friend, the perky finch, continued to dance from limb to limb before my eyes outside the window. My coffee was bitter with a hint of sweetness. I had no thoughts of judgment. I was simply aware and part of something greater than my physical body and the space it occupied. I felt aware of all that is. All of this awareness filled me at the same time. I had no place to be or anything to achieve. I simply bathed in the moment. I was awareness itself. I was in a place beyond my known identity. I was part of something greater than my individual identity. I realize now that my solo trips to Santa Fe were about being with a capital B. I was taking time out of my busy schedule and being present to the now. Of course, the creative act does require attention and action. We must act, listen, and react to create a physical piece of art. Doing is needed, but creation begins in the spiritual realm. A spiritual artist practices time spent in being. A spiritual artist sits with the paint, the canvas, the passing emotion, and is receptive to the voice of creative intelligence. Creation occurs in the unity of our spiritual presence with all that is. We keep ourselves open to a greater power and learn to engage with it while our individualized expression manifests. A spiritual artist turns creativity from an act of doing to an act of being. Being comes first. You must be present, fully present, and waiting for inspired action. I'm going to repeat that. Being comes first. You must be present, fully present, and waiting for inspired action. Our society is so focused on doing that our efforts are wasted. We begin doing and doing and doing, and we lose track of the why. We put more emphasis on accomplishing goals and checking off items on a list than fully expanding our consciousness before we enter the studio. It is when we are fully present with the creative project that divine inspiration downloads. Being creates space for the idea to arrive. It is when we are fully present with the creative process that divine inspiration downloads. Being creates space for the idea to arrive. I challenge you to practice turning the creative process from a state of doing to a state of being. Better yet, consider employing doing and being in a playful dance. The creative spark, the idea, arrives in the space of being. In Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she describes creativity as a force of enchantment, a magical experience where an idea seeks a home in a willing participant, someone who will bring it into existence. If that person is not receptive or willing to receive the idea, the concept will seek another person ready to bring it into physical reality. Quote, ideas are driven by a single impulse to be made manifest. And the only way an idea can be made manifest in our world is through collaboration with a human partner. It is only through a human's efforts that an idea can be escorted out of the ether and into the realm of the actual. Therefore, ideas spend eternity swirling around us, searching for available and willing human partners. I'm talking about all ideas here: artistic, scientific, industrial, commercial, ethical, religious, political. When an idea thinks it has found somebody, say you, who might be able to bring it into the world, the idea will pay you a visit. It will try to get your attention. Mostly, you will not notice. This is likely because you're so consumed by your own dramas, anxieties, distractions, insecurities, and duties that you aren't receptive to inspiration. The idea will try to wave you down, perhaps for a few moments, perhaps for a few months, perhaps even for a few years. But when it finally realizes that you're oblivious to its message, it will move on to someone else. End quote. I agree with Gilbert that ideas surround us, but I don't believe that they have an independent will. I think that ideas are comprised of spirit. Because they are spiritual first and foremost, ideas are omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, and contain all creative potential. This greater power is the creator, creation, and all creative possibilities. This greater power is the creator, creation, and all creative possibilities. New Thought writer and teacher Ernest Holmes explains the difference in his book, Can We Talk to God? Quote, we are surrounded by an infinite mind, which, should we become receptive to it, could acquaint us with anything and everything. I would like, however, to differentiate between the thought of being surrounded by ideas and the thought of being surrounded by an infinite mind. Ideas are the product of the mind, hence mind is the father. There could be no thought without a thinker. I believe that we are surrounded by both ideas and the mind that conceived them, surrounded by an infinite intelligence, which is the mind of God and the potential storehouse of all possible knowledge. This must be true if we are dealing with the mind of God. This infinite mind is the cause of all that is and the ultimate of all it is, open to us as our thought is receptive to it. So an inventor draws inventive genius from it, a painter the inspiration to paint. What we draw from this mind is, of course, poured through the avenues of our own consciousness and interpreted in our act. In this way, each is an individualization of the universal spirit. End quote. There is one other point of mention I agree with Gilbert that an idea will proceed to the next willing participant. Still, the outcome will never be precisely the same, for the idea will be transformed through your creative DNA. There is no one else exactly like you, and when you co create with creative intelligence, the final result will reveal aspects of both. Does this make sense? Let me explain it differently. One of my favorite activities when presenting to a group of artists is to ask them to draw a heart. I pass a box of crayons to the audience and tell them to choose 2 to 3 crayons before handing it to the next person in the row. Then I give them 5 minutes to draw a heart on a piece of paper. The completed drawings are placed on the floor and reviewed. As the students examine the pictures, they notice the multitude of diversity in their strokes. The point of this exercise is to demonstrate that no two are exactly alike. Each of us is an individualized expression of spirit. And when we take an idea, like the spiritual concept of the heart, and engage with it, the final result is always different. It's always unique. The choice of color, the size and shape of the heart, and the decision to add words or other attributes to the drawing are personal. No one is exactly like you, nor will there ever be. You are an individual, and your co creative experience will be distinct. Do not worry whether your work is original. Your creativity must be authentic if you practice being while engaging with spirit. I love this chapter, and I've talked about listening, and I've talked about listening and reacting, but this is a little different because one is an active thing where we actually listen to what's coming out to us. The other one is about maintaining a state, a connection to spirit. This is a very spiritual aspect of what this whole book is talking about. It's talking about constantly aligning yourself with that greater power. And when we align ourselves with that greater power, it means that we kind of turn off that critical mind. We just sit in the silence and be present and watch and feel what's around us and what's in us. It's a practice. Some people even call this prayer. It's a form of prayer. A Buddhist would meditate on this. They meditate. It's this place of just feeling the space around you. And I learned in that day in Santa Fe that I had gotten to the point, after being there a couple of days by myself, that I started the day in that wonderful place. And so when I walked up to the easel, I simply was present to whatever inspiration pops into my head. And so I want you to understand this concept. When you practice being, when you're practice staying in that state, and I call it being in the green, staying in the middle place, staying in that place of fun, that place of noticing and listening, and that place of love, ideas just come to you. Inspire that next stroke, that next idea. And if you're struggling with a painting today, go back to being. Stop doing. Sit down and be. That might mean just sitting in front of the painting. It could mean leaving the studio and going out into nature. It could mean coming back later. But practice being. And what I learned, and what I'd like to share with you most importantly, is this is a practice that you do all day long, not just in the art studio. Do it at breakfast. Do it when you go out to lunch with that business partner. Do it in the studio. Do it before you go to bed at night. Constantly pray without ceasing is what they would call it. Constantly pray without ceasing. Constantly be in the state of a spiritual artist. Thank you for listening to The Spiritual Artist. Share this Doodle Book Club with your friends. They can start now, even if they start on June 1st. It's a 20-day program. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and being a spiritual artist with you.
Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.